Hello, everyone. My name is Elle Siegel, and I am the Advocacy Outreach Director at Rails to Trails Conservancy. Thank you for joining our webinar today, part of our Changemaker for Trails series, focused on the who and how behind local and state decision-making for trails. As I said, I'm Elle, and I'll be sort of your MC, kicking things off and doing some Q&A a little bit later. We're also going to be joined by Erica Briggs, our new Midwest Policy Manager, where she is based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And in addition to being our wonderful policy manager, Erica also has a lot of great experience as a city council member in Ann Arbor. So she'll be talking a bit about that as well. And then Laura Cohen, our director of our Western region, has been with us for many years and also has worked with the state legislature in California. So we have a wealth of experience with us today, and we're excited to share with you. So next slide. So just real quick, some housekeeping and technical support. We all are probably used to Zoom by now, but if you're having any technical difficulties, here's some information on calling by phone to get troubleshooting help. There's also a great customer support website. So feel free to take advantage of those resources. For Q&A, we're going to save time at the end. If you have any questions, feel free to use the question and answer box at sort of the bottom center of your screen. And if you have more detailed technical assistance questions, you can email railtrails at railstotrails.org. And then last but not least, after today's webinar, you're going to receive a follow-up email with a quick survey. I think also when you log off, there'll be a quick survey. So we'd love to hear from you about the webinar and get your feedback. So thank you so much. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to recap a little bit if those of you or some of you might not have been able to join our first webinar in March, talking about advocacy basics. So want to just kind of set the scene for our conversation today. So what is advocacy? It is taking a position. This could be a big position, like the ambitious goals we have for sort of transforming the country into a nation connected by trails, or something small, like really making an intersection in your community feel safer for biking. It's supporting a cause and growing community support for that cause, and then working with local, regional, and state and federal decision makers to support your cause. So gathering support from folks who have the decision-making ability to make some of this a reality. So next slide, please. As a reminder, you know, the work that we're doing here is hard, and it takes sometimes years, if not decades, to see a trail start from sort of a vision to getting planning going, construction. So it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of community engagement, a lot of local, regional, and state political support, as well as funding, which often comes into play from the state or from the federal government. So just want to acknowledge that this is a long-term vision that we're often talking about here, and just applaud us all for our patience in working diligently to make all of these amazing trails happen across our communities. So next slide, please. So a reminder of what RTC's role is in advocacy. So we are really at the forefront of federal, state, regional, and local funding and policy changes. So again, that funding being the way that we get planning done, the way we get construction done, the way we build trails, really, and focusing that really around connectivity. So connecting communities for folks to be able to walk, bike, and roll to daily destinations. We love celebrating leaders who prioritize trails, so we'll feature a few of them later in some of these slides, including governors, state legislature members. And then we really try to also elevate great examples of impactful work happening for trail networks across the country. And then just a reminder, I'm sure a lot of folks hopefully know this, but we do more than rail trails. Rail trails are our bread and butter, of course, but we work on all types of active transportation, all types of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So we, again, focus this on connectivity, but any trail is something that we cherish. So next slide, please. And our impact on advocacy. So just a few things that we've been able to accomplish with your help and support. The bipartisan trail caucuses we've been able to work on, particularly in Indiana and Ohio, have been able to accomplish quite a bit at the state level. We've been really diligent in supporting important state legislation, federal legislation, and then budget and ballot measures, which are often really key for funding trails as well. At the federal level, many of you have hopefully heard of the bipartisan infrastructure law by now. That has been huge and really transformational for funding for trails. So that's been something we've been championing, both passing the law and then also making sure that the funds are implemented to support trails. Increasing funding and supporting communities and applying for grants. So, particularly from an equity lens, this is something that we focus a lot on, is how can we support communities in getting funding in their state and then implementing the grants successfully. And then elevating the importance again of connectivity. So you're going to hear that word probably a lot, which is connecting people to daily destinations. And that can take the place in grants, earmarks, state funds, all sorts of things. It's not so much the focus of our webinar, but just to remind folks of some of the funding things there. So next slide, please. And then your role in advocacy, which is, a huge part of what we're here to kind of frame today. For those of you who weren't at our webinar in March, there was a really great framework kind of stepping back from everything to look at everyday advocacy, which is really about bringing people to trails, making people aware of trails, posting about it on social media, just really within your network of friends and family members in your community, highlighting the impact trails have on a day-to-day basis for you. Community advocacy kind of being the next level up in more formality. So planning activities on the trail, attending community meetings, joining local advocacy organizations and educating officials. So I'm sure a lot of you are doing that already, and we're going to have a poll in a sec to gauge your interest and your knowledge of that as well. And then last, the most direct form of advocacy, we're calling direct advocacy, is lobbying elected officials. That is often meeting with your city council or your county level officials, potentially meeting with agency staff, mobilizing support for ballot measures. So all of that really nitty-gritty work in advocacy, that's, when you think of sort of lobbying and things like that, that's going to be a huge part of this. So next slide, please. Perfect. So I'm going to launch a quick poll so we can hear from you all. So you should see the poll coming up. So we want to hear about your advocacy participation. So hopefully you all are seeing a poll. There we go. Seeing some responses come in. So let's give it a sec here. Great. Give it another minute. Right, lots of you are participating. Thanks for that. All right, we're going to go ahead and, well, more people are trickling in. All right, we're going to go ahead and end it and share results with everybody. So a lot of folks have responded to action alerts, which we often send out. So thank you for that. Social media, it looks like, is really popular as well. And a lot of people contacting staff in public agencies. That's awesome. And then volunteering as well. So some really great stuff here. You guys are well on your way to be just amazing advocates, and you already are. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And I think next slide, Erica, I think if you want to hop on in.
Great. And thanks all. Thanks for being here today. Again, my name is Erica Briggs. I am a new Rails to Trails employee, as Elle mentioned, started just a couple of months ago. And while I serve doing state policy work and local work for Rails to Trails, I'm going to be speaking a lot today about sort of my own experiences, both as an advocate at the local level and state level, and as well as an elected official. So that's kind of the framework through which I'm going to be speaking today as we talk through sort of, Laura and I talk through who these kind of local and regional and state key actors are and how to engage and influence from our experiences. So next slide, please. So, starting at the local level, you can see here that a picture of the mayor of Milwaukee, Cavalier Johnson. This is from just an event that Rails to Trails had in June there. Mayor Johnson is a really strong champion for this work of connected non-motorized systems. You can see just from the backdrop, Rails to Trails is there as an advocacy organization. It's being hosted at Wheel and Sprocket, which is a large bike store in the community. What you don't see is the crowd, which is filled with elected officials and other advocates. And it's that climate that you're really trying to create in your own community and build to get there, because that's when success can really start moving forward rapidly. So something that somebody told to me a number of years ago was to really think of local success is like a stool, three-legged stool, where one stool is that community support that's generated from the enthusiasm and work of the local advocacy community. Another stool is the professional staff within agencies, that knowledgeable, competent administrative support. And then that final leg is political will. Do you have those elected officials and those champions? And when you get a strong base under you, you can really do a lot. But you'll start noticing when the stool gets wobbly. And so which one that you need to be working and building on more. So to start off with, in terms of advocacy, I think one of the most important things to remember is that, this is you, obviously, in this audience. It's also others. It's made up of the advocacy organizations that are in your community. And one of the key pieces is to make sure that if you're not already engaged with them, that you're really informed about who else is part of this conversation. One, you can learn from them. The conversation is probably, it's an ongoing conversation that's happening and a long history with it. And so you want to be talking and learning from folks around you. And, if you've been in this for a while, it's evident from some of the responses, how do you build out that coalition of folks? How do you make your coalition stronger? Because some folks may be having more success than others, or have additional networks that you can pull from. But, essentially, it's also important to remember that from an elected official perspective, folks are often looking to the advocacy community for sort of the knowledge base. You are the ones that are going to help elected officials, and oftentimes staff as well, really understand what's happening, what the community wants, how important it is to the community. And so your voice really and truly is important, both from an expertise perspective and also from that, is this actually important to the community? Administrative staff. This is where, depending on the size of your community, it can be intimidating, right? Maybe you're from a small town and you've just got a couple of folks in your local township hall or city hall, or maybe you're living in a large community and you've got just layers and layers of bureaucracy that you're trying to figure out kind of how to handle that. But administrative staff, these are folks that you want to be building up strong relationships with. Remember that these folks are likely to be around for a long time. And so every interaction should really be, on your part, working to have, despite what level of frustration you may be coming in with, a great deal of civility, and recognizing that people, just like you do, have a lot of things on their plate. And so, really work to build up these strong relationships with them, and understand how your city government works. So, what's the structure of it? Is it a strong mayor system or a weak mayor system? Is it, how influential? Do you have a city administrator? What is their background? What are the key levels of, are you working primarily on the issues that you're working on? Is that going to be through parks, or is that going to be through transportation? And so a lot of this is going to be involving really doing your homework, making sure that you are signed up for alert systems, making sure that you have read through the parks plan or the transportation plan and understand, is it is it a living document that is, everybody's mobilizing behind right now, or is it something that's desperately in need of update to make sure that your advocacy issues and priorities are in it? And then, just, I think those are some key ways to be engaging with administrative staff, is to respect the work that they've been doing. So, and then of course there are your elected officials, right? And again, this is important to understand the governance structure of your city. The mayor may or may not be, the really the key influencer, decision maker in your community. I mean, they are in terms of their strength. If it's a strong mayor system, they may have a lot more administrative strength over departments than in a weak mayor system. And so that's important to understand that system. It's also important to understand who your champions are. And if you're just new into advocacy, that can, you can be looking at a large body and wonder who your friends are there. And so part of the ways to understand this, obviously, is by talking to folks, talking to other advocates, understanding that, but also looking at the boards and commissions that folks might be serving on, because people are often volunteering for, or trying to get themselves into positions that they're most interested in. So, who's serving on the Parks Commission? If there's an advisory commission to council, to planning commissions, transportation commissions, what's their committee structure look like, and looking at the service there. But don't be scared to reach out to people, ask them out to coffee, sign up, go attend their coffee hours. If they have staff, reach out to chat with them. It's really key to be building those relationships. And one of the things is, these projects, especially if you're working to build a connected non-motorized network in your community, it takes some time. And so by the time somebody, a project starts and is completed, some of those folks that are in local elected officials may have moved on to the state level and may be helpful for other reasons. So next slide, please. So this is a local advocacy example. It's kind of just a short, I just wanted to give you a short case study of kind of what happens when everything's maybe working well. And this is one for my own home community of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Washtenaw County. And it's, I would say that 10 years ago, I don't think we would have seen sort of the same outcome. So again, it's about building those relationships and making sure all three of those legs of the stool are working well over time. So the issue at hand here is there's a rail line that runs through Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor. It's been designated as a high-speed corridor. Amtrak runs along it. In the Ann Arbor area, it runs along the Huron River. It's a very scenic corridor. There's a lot of recreational opportunities in the area. A lot of folks are illegally crossing the railroad tracks because they're trying to access some of these destinations that are on other sides, and because connectivity is not as strong as it should be. And so, but for the railroad, this has presented some issues in terms of some strikes on the railroad, and they're working to increase the speed of the rail line. And so there was a desire to improve safety. And so the strategy, the tool that they came out with their funding was to put up a fence, and put up a fence for hundreds of miles along both sides of the corridor. Now, for anybody who's thinking about connectivity and that there's not legal crossings, this has presented a real issue. And so when this conversation happened in my neck of the woods, essentially a lot of folks really weren't aware that this was going on. And this is kind of a case study of how important it is when everybody's working together in tandem. So folks in the community started hearing about it, getting really frustrated about the concept of the fence going up, this, what the impacts might be to wildlife, access to natural features, and then also to the development of a really key trail in our community that's called the Border to Border Trail. And so there was a public meeting. Advocates really made city council members and county commissioners aware of this meeting. We showed up for that, and where MDOT and Amtrak were really looking for feedback on what the fence design would be. We said, you need to be working with the local community on this. We need to be working to make sure that the trail is able to be built, that the non-motorized connections are put into place, instead of just building a fence. And so we're, the public meeting ends, and City Council passes a resolution against sort of the action. The County Commission passes a resolution against the action. And also simultaneously, there's a larger, more formal advocacy organization in the community, Huron Waterloo Pathways Initiatives, that also took up the charge and started convening elected officials and folks from the state DOT and Amtrak to come together with a sort of coordinated meeting after this so we could talk about next steps. And the result of all of this was that everybody started communicating a lot better and more effectively. And MDOT put their plans on hold to make sure that they were working effectively with us and the local community, so that, that we're making sure that we are not blocking access to the development of a key path in our community, that we're making sure that we're prioritizing non-motorized connections, and that we also are working and providing MDOT with the feedback that they need to do to put forward the safety improvements in our community in a coordinated way. So, real strong example of what can happen. Takes years to build this type of relationship, but again, I don't think this would have happened about 10 years ago on our own. So next slide, please. So on to regional engagement. Obviously, if you're working to build non-motorized systems, these are often likely happening across jurisdiction lines, just like road infrastructure. And some of this may be on road infrastructure in terms of those protected facilities. And so one of the key actors we wanted to make sure that you're aware of, if you're not working with them, is the Metropolitan Planning Organizations in your community. Metropolitan Planning Organizations, real briefly, are regional agencies that are required for metropolitan areas that have populations over 50,000. If you're in an area that has over 200,000, there are additional sort of organizational structures as well. They're probably existing within a council of governments. These are highly, they're really important organizations, agencies that exist in your metropolitan areas. All federal transportation funding, or most of the federal transportation funding, is kind of routing through them. There are 420 of these agencies across the United States. Now there's about half of them are about freestanding agencies, and the other half may be a part of the county or a state-run organization. So again, you're just going to have to look up and understand what the agency structure is in your community, where it's located. Is it housed within a council of governments? Is it a standalone agency? Is it housed within a state office? As I mentioned, I serve on two of these because of kind of the odd structure within our area. One is, here's a picture of the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments that has their board. There's also the Washington Area Transportation Study and locally. But these boards are made up of elected officials. You have somebody that's serving in your area. You're going to want to talk to them, make sure that they're aware of your plans and understand what the Metropolitan Planning Organization is doing and what their priorities are. It's important to know that MPOs have two main goals. One is the development of a long-range plan. That is the plan. You'd want to make sure that your connected system of trails and non-motorized infrastructure is embedded in that. And the other is a short-term transportation improvement program, or a TIP, that is sort of a prioritized list of projects that will receive federal funding. It's sort of the budget, and those projects come up through local communities. But how that prioritization happens is really important. And are they looking at issues of connectivity and equity, and in terms of how those projects get prioritized for funding in your region? So that's something that Rails to Trails is really interested in, and something that we're trying to move forward across the country to make sure that these are key partners in terms of moving our vision forward. There are also, of course, other regional actors that are going to be in your area. They differ in some places. They may be the metro parks that are building out strong connected networks. There may also be other regional agency offices through the DOT or your Department of Natural Resources. If you're not in a metropolitan area, there may be rural transportation planning organizations that you're going to want to connect with through the state. And then, of course, state elected officials, though they are state actors, if they often represent multiple jurisdictions, and they can be great partners with understanding who you should be connecting with and talking to move forward your vision. So I'm going to pass this over to Laura, who can continue to talk about sort of regional engagement and also engaging at the state level.
Thank you, Erica. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Cohen. I'm the Western Region Director for Rails to Trails. And just picking up on the regional engagement, just to offer another example, here in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, our regional transportation agency and MPO was recently working on Plan Bay Area, which is the required long-range strategic plan, similar to what other metro areas prepare. And in the community engagement process last year, they asked for public feedback on the plan, which covered all of the transportation modes, but they ended up getting hundreds of comments specifically supporting active transportation and biking and walking improvements, and to front load those investments in the 30-year plan so that more of that money would be spent early on and you'd get the benefit of all those projects earlier. And just getting those hundreds of comments really made an impact. That was one of the topics that got the most number of comments. And so it really does make a difference. And so as individual advocates, you can leverage lots of influence if you mobilize friends and neighbors to comment, or work within local organizations and nonprofit groups. And you can make it easy to get other people to comment by just sharing some bullet points of the comments that you think are most important to make, and lean on some nonprofit advocacy groups in your area to help you develop those comments and talking points. So it does make a difference. Next slide. So here's the key audiences for state level advocacy. And, one of the interesting things about trails is that they do cut across many issues. Let's see, having a little connection issue there. Okay. So they cut across many issues, so you can appeal to different people and different agencies based on their focus, whether it's transportation, parks and open space, environmental protection, public health. It's very cross-cutting, and that's a real advantage because those things are connected. With the state legislature, let's go to the next slide. It's really helpful to become familiar with your state representatives and what they care about, even if they haven't historically been supportive of trails in particular. They probably care about something that's related, like street safety, expanding recreational opportunities, reducing traffic, encouraging people to be more active in their daily life for public health reasons. And so there's usually a way you can find in researching their background and their website to appeal to them, even if they're kind of new to being an advocate for trails. You can attend events. A lot of legislators have town halls or other special events where they want to get out and meet with their constituents. So attending those and introducing yourself is a great way to do that. I also encourage folks to develop a relationship with the district office staff, and in many of the larger states, the state legislators will have staff both in the capital and in the district. And as a former staff to a state senator, myself, I was the head of the district office. A big part of my job was fielding calls and inquiries from constituents on a wide range of issues. Many of them were just kind of a one-off thing, like please vote for this or please vote against this. But some folks took the time to develop a working relationship, and the advocates that I found most effective were the ones that did recognize the importance of establishing a longer-term relationship based on give and take, and they brought something to the table. For instance, they could be a resource to me, gathering feedback from their community about issues or proposals, and providing that back to me for being a sounding board. They could track down information or data to help me make the case for something or bolster an argument. And they would also help our office publicize events that our senator was involved in, and encourage more participation. So it can be a real productive working partnership, and you build trust that way. And it's a really good way to develop that relationship with staff, because staff are also the gatekeepers to the elected official themselves. And so they're much more likely to listen to you, to put you in touch with the senator, or encourage the senator or assembly person to listen to your views if you kind of develop that sort of constructive relationship, and they know that you're trustworthy and responsive. Next slide. State agencies implement all these state laws and funding decisions, so it's they play an important role, and across all these different issue areas, as we've been talking about. So these are all different agencies that function independently, and it's good to figure out where do you think you're going to have the most leverage, where are the funding programs that support the trails that you are advocating for, and dig in a little deeper in those areas. And these big bureaucracies can be daunting, but there are ways to engage that don't have to be too overwhelming. One is they often have citizen advisory boards of some kind, like a bicycle advisory committee or a trail advisory committee that you can join or get appointed to help you stay informed, or just learn who is on those advisory boards and develop a relationship with them to stay informed. Passing a bill or a budget measure in the legislature is really important to pay attention to, but that's step one, and often the guidelines and how that is implemented are just as important. As they say, the devil is in the details. And so to be a really effective advocate, it's important to stay involved during the development of program guidelines. If they've just created or expanded a new funding program, to follow those to the agency that will be implementing, and find out, what the rules are going to be, because, the way the rules are drafted can make trails very competitive or not very competitive at all. And it's sometimes just tweaking a few things in how the guidelines are written that can make a big difference. And similar to the point I made with legislative staff, developing a relationship with the staff who implement specific trail funding programs is pretty important. And finding out who they are and becoming a known quantity to them. Get signed up for any email lists that they use to alert people to funding opportunities, or when they're developing program guidelines or making big decisions about how important trail funding programs are going to be implemented. Next slide. Statewide advocacy groups and coalitions. This is part of the work that Rails to Trails does, certainly, and many other more locally focused groups. So it's good to get to know who are the groups and coalitions doing this work, because that's an easy way to kind of stay informed, is to lean on them and the information that they share, action alerts, so that oh, this is a really critical vote coming up, or a critical decision. Weighing in now is going to make a difference. And so you don't have to try and monitor all that on your own. You can really lean into these advocacy groups. And sometimes they will organize legislative lobby days at the Capitol, and having constituents come and actually visit state legislators can be really effective. And it also can sharpen your advocacy skills, because those groups usually organize those lobby days with, here's our priorities, here's our talking points, here's background on each of these legislators and their staff, and here's what might appeal most to them. It's a really good way to increase your skills as an advocate. Next slide. RTC, Rails to Trails Conservancy, has learned over many years that working in coalitions to set regional goals and advocate for them together is highly effective. So that's why we created the Trail Nation program, our national program focusing on establishing regional trail network visions and working with them, working on them to implement them with a lot of partners. So you really increase your leverage and your influence when you organize many voices speaking up and working across those jurisdictions. A couple of the examples, we have a number of these going on all over the country for a number of years now. The map you see is for the Industrial Heartland Trail Coalition that's based in Ohio and several neighboring states, and they have set out this vision that's mapped out there for a trail network that is very focused on bringing tourism and local economic development to the region. There's a lot of small towns through there that could really use that sort of boost and become trail destinations or trail towns. And so they're really working on closing all the gaps and connecting it all together. And everybody has a common interest in doing that and putting this big vision out there. So they've been really effective. Another example that I work on is the Bay Area Trails Collaborative in the 9-county San Francisco Bay Area. We've mapped out a very ambitious 2,600-mile network and have over 40 organizations, agencies, and businesses working together to advocate for the completion and maintenance of that network. And we've every few years we update our strategic plan and decide where excuse me, where to focus. And we do state level advocacy, regional advocacy. We look for decisions on the funding sources to try and grow the funding. We also have a trail development working group that really focuses on which projects can we help nudge forward and make some progress on, like alert them to funding opportunities to fund the planning phase or the design and construction phase of the key gaps. And then we, celebrate every time they get some funding or there's a groundbreaking or a ribbon cutting, and really try to publicize those and build momentum and excitement and support for every step along the way to build out this great network, and talk about all the many benefits of connecting all these pieces together. The connections to, for your commute, or as a safe route to school, or just to get out and get active, which was so important during the pandemic lockdown. So if there are local, regional, or statewide coalitions in your area advocating on trails or related issues, it's really a good way to plug into those, to stay informed and to know when are the most critical times to act, when are there key decisions that are being made, that having a few hundred people will weighing in will really make a difference. So now I'll turn it back over to Elle as we kind of head to wrap up and discussion, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Laura and Erica. That was incredibly informative. So a little bit flagging what's next for this series. So you can take some action today. So as I talked about at the beginning, using social media is a really great way to do things, what we call everyday advocacy, where you're spreading the word about trails and the importance of them and the diversity of use for them, how they're essential infrastructure. So we really recommend next time you're out on the trail, go ahead and take a picture, post it on Facebook or Twitter, or Instagram, and please tag us. We always love to see our members and supporters out on the trail. Attending community meetings. There are some incredible things happening in your community. We guarantee it, whether it be a city council meeting to attend, a Metropolitan Planning Organization to potentially check out. They may have some great committees. We really recommend getting a sense of what's happening locally in your community. Organizing events on the trail. We just had Celebrate Trails Day about maybe 6 weeks ago. And I'm sure a lot of you across the country joined up and attended one of those events, but there's never a bad time to have an event on a trail, especially this summer. Folks are, looking to be outside, enjoy the nice weather. So, really recommend working with some of your folks in your community to host an event. And then meeting with elected officials and leaders. So we're going to have some additional resources on that over the coming months. For those of you who this may be new, we want to make sure you feel comfortable and know how to do that. So over the coming months, look out for some additional resources there. Next slide, please. And some additional resources for what we'll be focusing on here. So you can look out for some advocacy spotlights this summer, looking at communities that are doing great work, things that can be replicated. So this summer we should have at least one of those coming your way. And then this fall, look out for some more webinars like these, helping you get a sense of some timely things that are happening that are very much important to be tapped into. Like I said, some webinars, some blogs. There is a great Advocating for Trails site that we have, which features an advocacy how-to guide. So that's going to walk through a lot of this information and is a really useful resource. So I think we put that link in the chat previously for you to take a look at as well. But railstotrails.org/advocate is going to have a lot of that information as well. So next slide. I think it's Q&A time. Perfect. So please keep adding some questions in. But we did get a couple questions for Q&A. Let me add Laura and Erica back in. So we got a lot of questions about sort of getting involved in people's specific areas. So, obviously RTC has some really great projects across the country that you all highlighted, whether it be the Bay Area Trails Coalition, the Industrial Heartland work. But for people who are interested in finding work locally, do you have any recommendations to connect with other local advocates? We got several questions saying, I'm in this county in Florida, I'm in this part of the country. Do you have any recommendations for how to sync up with other folks doing good work? I'm happy to offer some suggestions, but thought you both may have some ideas as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. So I think, part of it is starting with your friend Google, and, just typing in, doing some preliminary stuff, is there a bicycle advocacy organization? Is there a pedestrian advocacy organization in your city, in your county, in your state? If you're in a more rural area, you may not have, a formal advocacy organization. Even if you're in a urban area, it may be pretty loosely knit together. It's quite likely it may be run by volunteers, and communication is challenging to do well consistently. So, it may be out there and they just may not be broadcasting themselves as loudly. So you may have to, look on Google or look on social media. Another way is to, talk with folks that you think might have a better sense of what's going on. So, reach out, if you're reaching out to your community, to an elected official, if that's somebody you have a connection with, and find out who they're chatting with, who's influencing them, and maybe I'll pass it over to Laura. There's kind of a whole, so she can chime in with some different ideas as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, those are the suggestions I was thinking about. And what I could add is think also about if you are in a city or a town or a county, contacting the planners of those places and find out who handles some of the bike and pedestrian improvements, like what are the plans, and if there's a route that you're considering thinking, oh, this would make a great trail, talk to them about, is that in a plan? Is there any thinking about, developing a project along the lines that you're thinking of, or who are the groups that get involved in these kinds of projects, so they can also be a good resource for you as well.
Thank you both. Yeah, and I'll just add someone in the chat saying, yeah, the seeing if your town or county has a pedestrian bicycle advisory council. So that's great as well. And then I put in the chat, RTC has been tracking trail networks across the country. So, obviously that's going to be a little bit different, but if there's a trail network in your community, there's bound to be some great opportunities. And if there isn't, there may be plans for some as well. But just to give a sense of the vastness of how many communities have networks, I think it's a great demonstration of the amount of work that is in front of us, the amount of opportunity that's in front of us. And so thought I'd flag that as well. We have another question here. Someone said that they're working on relocating part of their trail and ran into an opponent who says the trail was used by quote unquote bad guys. So how can we talk about trails in a way that really engenders a sense of community culture and recognizes that trails actually improve safety, and sort of combat those oppositional messages? So and then I have kind of a follow-up question from that as well, but we'll start with combating that kind of message and showing the things that trails do add to communities.
Well, I can start. So it's very common that people have concerns about, well, if you're building a trail, won't people just use the trail to come and maybe steal my stuff or pick fruit from my orchard, or there are a lot. That's a very common concern, and so Rails to Trails does have a lot of good resources on our website. I know that there are different studies and reports we've done over the years about safety, community safety and trails, and private property concerns. So that's a good place to look. And it's also important to understand, sometimes a very small group of people can be very vocal and give the impression that this trail opposition somehow reflects the whole community when it doesn't. So that's a matter of organizing to talk to your neighbors and talk to other people and mobilize the folks that think the trail would be a very positive thing, and make sure that you're balancing those voices, and even do maybe some sort of a poll where you invite people to weigh in, at the grocery store, people using the trail, or if the trail's not there yet, find some other way to kind of elevate those voices and give, elected officials are going to respond if they hear, much more of a tidal wave of, yes, we think this is a good idea, versus just hearing a few negative voices and don't hear anything from the other side. So it's really important to understand, is the majority of your community in support or opposition? And if you're not hearing enough of the support voices, there are ways to kind of organize that, encourage them to speak up so that they are communicating the right messages to the elected officials.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I've used a platform called change.org pretty successfully a number of times to be able to collect those signatures around an issue, and you can share that via social media and start demonstrating that there's strong support for a project. If you're hearing loudly from one individual or just a couple of folks. Another place to look, depending on your community, is to demonstrate that support is your existing planning documents. So plans are required to be developed with the community. And so if you've got a non-motorized transportation plan or a parks plan or something that's supporting that project out there, it was done with outreach to the community, and you can look and say, okay, this was supported by hundreds of people participated in the formation of this plan, and this isn't, this is what the community really wants to see. So I think, always remembering to fall back on those existing planning documents helps to bolster the work we're doing. And they often have a lot of additional sort of reasons why communities are prioritizing this work, whether it's, from a public health or environmental or economic development or quality of life perspective. So, and Rails to Trails, again, has a lot of resources on approaching these arguments from a evidence-based manner.
Thank you. So we're getting lots of questions in the chat, and we probably won't be able to answer all of them, but thank you for all of your questions. So a kind of follow-up question to that is, how do we build sort of relationships with folks and kind of cultivate them to become champions for this work? So we talked a little about the opposition, but Erica and Laura, curious how you've kind of built relationships to bring people in as champions to sponsor legislation, to to lead committees. So yeah, just curious to hear kind of what that's been like, and how that's been an impactful thing in your journeys as advocates on the ground.
Yeah, building champions. That's one of the reasons that I ran for local office, right? As I started feeling that there was a need for having more folks in my own city council in that space. So sometimes that might be something that motivates you. You might realize that that's actually something that you need to do. You need to be advocating for somebody else to do. But a lot of times it's just about reaching out and connecting, and we talked about evidence, but stories go a long way about, sharing stories about why this is important to you as you're connecting with local elected officials or folks in a place of influence, and really talking about how impactful this work is to community, whether it's, from whatever perspective and lens that you're able to speak through. I think cultivating folks to speak is often, and be a champion of issues, is often giving them the resources to do that work well. So giving them information, slowly educating them, and giving them the data points that they need to speak on an issue, and helping them realize that this is, if you're speaking about, elected officials as champions, how important it really is to the community. And that's really about mobilizing the advocacy community to make sure that sometimes some folks will champion an issue because they realistically they feel it, it is an issue that they naturally are drawn to. Other folks are going to champion an issue because politically that is the right move for them. So and in the end, both are important to have when the votes, when something is being voted on. So you may just have to determine what, where you're needing to cultivate that.
Perfect, thank you. And then I think we have time. Oh, Laura, did you want to add something there?
Oh, well, I was just noticing maybe a follow-up question to the last issue about safety. Do you have data showing safety improves?
Yeah.
So yes, go to our website. There's information and reports where they demonstrate that having more legitimate use is eyes on the trail, and having more people using it tends to discourage undesirable activity. There's reports where they've interviewed police and fire departments saying yes, there was less incidents after the trail was built than when it was just an unused railway that nobody was patrolling. And enforcement is important too. A city or county shouldn't just build a trail and then not provide any kind of enforcement or policing. That is part of the job, and the physical maintenance, so that there's not garbage and littering and dumping, but also just having some sort of a presence for safety is important too. So yes to all of those things.
And then I'm seeing a question. I'm not sure if I'm interpreting it correctly, but developing a long-term call to action. So, I feel like that can be kind of interpreted many different ways, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on, when you're working with your coalitions, how you set out the priorities, how you get, the long-term sort of strategy in place. And then, I think a call to action, making sure that it's compelling, that people understand it, that it's digestible. So I don't know if you have any thoughts there. Again, apologies if we're not interpreting that question correctly, particularly around the philanthropic piece, but want to see if you have any thoughts there, and then we'll probably close out, I would say, in a minute. So
yeah, I'm not sure if the question is, we're a local group and we would like to get a grant from a philanthropic organization, or whether they're suggesting that Rails to Trails do that. I assure you, we're doing that all the time as an organization, working with foundations and corporate giving programs and our individual donors, major donors, all the time, talking about the work that we do in different ways and how it can fit the goals of any particular foundation. But you can do the same thing as a local, oh, I see, a state, you have the state's largest philanthropic organization. Well, they will tell you what they're interested in and who they funded before. And, that's always the starting point, is learn as much as you can about that foundation, what they fund, what are their guidelines. Call them up and talk to a program officer saying, hey, we're doing something that we think is really important. It's a good fit for your funding priorities, and see if you can have a conversation about how to pitch it, what's their next funding opportunity, and are there certain things that would be more compelling to them in getting funding. So as much as you can research and then make some contact with those program officers, that will help you apply and just make a good case. And in addition to just kind of making the substantive arguments, and you can borrow a lot of great information from Rails to Trails website, I think it's also helpful to have stories from local people saying, this is how this other trail has changed my life, or this is how this would help our kids get to school safer, or whatever it is, having some real stories to make it come to life.
Perfect. Well, with that, next slide, Joe. Thank you. So thanks for everyone who's joined us today. We're going to send around a recording of this in the coming days, so look out for that. We really appreciate your time and support today. Here are our emails if you have any additional questions or thoughts. I believe when you X out, there should also be a survey. We'd love your feedback, or if you have any additional feedback, we'd welcome it. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful morning or afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.